Hey, it's not a phone call, but I'm Rachel. And Katie has so graciously asked me to speak about the feeling of being an other or the feeling of otherness, especially as a woman of, like as an Asian woman, those feelings were, predominantly sprinkled throughout my life. So I felt Katie would like to speak on this topic too, because I feel she can relate to a lot of my experiences as a woman and, being in LA and being an other. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And so Rachel and I met in high school, and we were on the same debate team. And I feel like debate was the first time that I had really ever experienced otherness because it was so predominantly male. And I think we had a lot of similar experiences of just
It's
hard.
a very male space.
It is. And
Yeah.
because our high school was an all girls school, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that kind of didn't filter its way into our education. Like everyone was kind of treated equally for the most part in terms of, access to the different classes. Maybe that's not entirely true. I think reflecting that's not super true, but
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't the constant threat of the male gaze or like, being judged because of your
Totally.
gender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was really, I don't know about your experience, but it was very interesting to transition from that all-girl space where feminism was, taught, we learned women's studies
Right.
and we were instilled with this confidence to speak in class and not really second guess ourselves. And then from that and then transitioning to USC, where white male privilege is like the pinnacle of the experience at USC. Like Greek life is huge there. So that was when my feeling of otherness was super amplified. Because I'm not like a super frat dude, obviously. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting to interact with people who feel the need to follow the norm but not wanting to follow that norm because one, it does not fit into what you view as part of your identity, or you just, I don't know, I feel like being the other is not always such a bad thing. I mean, there have been plenty of experiences where it can be, but I think it also helps you stand out in some ways. I'm sure you can talk to that too, especially like your experience of now being in art school and all these things. So
Yeah, it's so interesting. So my transition to college similarly like going to Stanford where I was then
mhm.
living next door to like a bunch of men and I was like, "Oh my God, this is so weird." Like I was in physics classes with men and it was all like mostly men and then I left
Mhm.
the physics department because I was just uncomfortable and felt kind of pushed out and not supported.
Yeah.
And then coming to art school, it's so interesting because every art student is the other. Like we are all really different in our
Yeah.
own ways. Like I'm not sure how many white men I even interact with who are students, and
Yeah.
it's kind of great because I think the next thing I wanted to ask you about was like finding community as another, or
Mhm.
like one of the ways to kind of feel more like comfortable in your either like your strangeness, which is I
Mhm.
think a positive thing personally, or
Mhm.
just not being part of like the general population or the majority. Like, have you found that you've like felt more comfortable in spaces in like a communal setting with people who you like vibe with or feel more similar to?
That's a great question. Um, as I transitioned from Immaculate Heart to USC, I sort of looked for that, connection and community of women that could support me like Immaculate Heart did. And I decided to join an Asian American sorority. I almost said society. Sorority. But my feelings of otherness were extremely amplified then because don't I I don't know how to put this, but I felt like the black sheep of
Mhm.
the group. They would enjoy, going to different music events, but I didn't really listen to that kind of music, and I would also always listen to like, you know more underground music and want to go to music things, but no one would want to go with me because they don't listen to that kind of music. So I had different interests. I thought I could recreate that, IMAC experience, but I think that's just unique to the high school itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess one negative of that feeling of otherness was that I felt extremely alone.
Right.
Yeah, so my sophomore year of college, I was still with the sorority, but I didn't really feel like I fit in. And so this, really amplified my anxiety and social anxiety. But through that experience, I learned what you said, being strange or being an other is a beautiful thing. And you don't really need to fit into one thing I've learned is that people appreciate your strangeness. It makes you stand out. It makes you unique. And I think in the beginning that's really hard to understand. Everyone has their own journey of understanding that, and mine was extremely difficult. It took a lot of time and reflection and journaling and speaking with other people who are also strange. But it once you get through that identity crisis, then you're like, fuck yeah, I'm strange, but I love it.
And I think that's so amazing and empowering. And this is so weird, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I had a similar experience. I joined a sorority because I was like, wow, I miss womanhood. And my high school was actually during high school, I was like, there's so many things I dislike. And then when I went away, I was like, wow, I miss just having a bunch of women around me to support me. But then once I got to Greek life, I was like, oh boy, this is not, what I expected. And then to feel othered, not that my sorority, I had super negative experiences with it, but to feel othered from a system where you thought you would feel at home is almost like a doubling.
Absolutely.
It is almost like twice as bad and strange. And it definitely, ironically, I ended up in cooperative living, communities, communes in college where everyone was weird and strange. And it was totally this kind of, everyone had a safe space to kind of embrace their own strangeness. And definitely as I've gotten older and now that I'm a practicing artist, I totally see that the people who are remembered in history aren't necessarily the ones who follow the norms and blend in with everyone else, even though that's also an okay way to live your life. But if you want to embrace your weirdnesses, it's a positive thing, and it's definitely hard but worth it.
There's so much value to understanding your uniqueness. And with that comes a sense of confidence, right? In high school, when people would say I'm weird, I would be like, oh, that's really rude. But now I wear it as a badge of honor. Yeah, I'm weird, but I love it. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that growth. And the parallels that we've had with the sorority Greek life. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I feel like a lot of girls who go to IMAC end up joining a sorority in their school. So it's really interesting to see that.
Absolutely. And kind of exactly what you said about confidence is also important. A lot of people describe me, or I'm self-described as a weird artist, and that is a wildly positive thing. Because it also means that I'm memorable and I'm unique and people remember what I'm working on. And I think personally, if I made stuff that was very similar to what everyone else was doing, I don't know if I'd feel as personally fulfilled. But I feel definitely it's a confidence thing to be able to be oh no, I'm not like everyone else around me, but that's why they love me and that's why they're interested in having videos with me or whatever. It definitely makes me feel more myself, or more true to myself.
Definitely. And I think you and I have both sort of grown into our weirdness. Definitely just experiencing different life experiences and exploring different sides of our identity until I don't think we've totally settled into our weirdness, and I think it's a lifelong process. But I think definitely getting more comfortable with being called weird and owning our weirdness. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you for having this conversation with me. It means a ton to talk to you, to have a fraction of your time. I know you're busy and amazing and talented. So thank you for everything. And I really look forward to talking more with you about this and other things. And it's just really good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so good to see you too. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course.